Okay, officially welcome everyone to the first 2024 session of the L&D Shakers Book Club. We're really pleased to kick off our book club this year with this book that many of you will have hopefully read, The Social Brain. And we're super excited to have one of the authors of the book here today. Feels like a big privilege for us to be asking a lot of questions to Tracy Camilleri. Welcome, Tracy.
Thank you so much. Thank you for inviting me. It's a great pleasure to be here.
Awesome. So as you join, there is a little question in the chat as a poll, and we would like to ask you, what are your favorite music genres? Who can guess why we're asking this question today?
Or... Oh, go ahead.
Feel free to wild guess, or if you read a specific part of the book, you might.
Because
who wants to go for it?
I can go for it. It is one of the 7 pillars of friendship. A connection with music means you're likely to have a connection as a friend.
Right. That was probably, for me at least, that was one of the most surprising insights from reading the book. And Tracy, actually, would you like to tell us a little bit about these 7 pillars of friendship and, like the importance of music and social bonding?
Sure. Yeah. So this comes from the research of our co-author, Robin Dunbar. And as you say, music is incredibly powerful connector. We often use playlists and so on, as you're doing, with groups when we're bringing them together. In fact, we were doing a workshop last week and with a board of an insurance company, and while they were working, put on some music. And what was extraordinary was how people started laughing. They hadn't laughed up until that point. And apparently, although I'm not an expert on this, dating apps, it's the single best predictor of a match is if they share a musical taste. But as you say, there are 7 pillars to friendship, in the research. So music is one of them. That I can go through all of them if you like, but they are in the book. Growing up in the same place, similar sense of humor is another good one. Language, dialect, and so on is perhaps an obvious one. Educational experiences, again, tends to be another. Your worldview, and that is sort of moral, religious, kind of political kind of landscape. And then the last one is your hobbies and interests. And that's, the more pillars of friendship you have, the stronger and the quicker you make friends. And we certainly found, we organised, the last point just to say, we organised some gatherings of large groups, particularly post-pandemic, and people were nervous about coming back together. And we found it was a very good way of putting, kind of all the embroiderers together, all the, runners together. And then the following day, we would put them in groups where they didn't share pillars of friendship and, find out about one another. So it's, something you can find out a bit more about in our book.
Awesome. Thank you for that, Tracy. And we wanted to start with this question because who knows, this book club is also a way for us to get to know other people. So I'm going to actually end the results now so you can see everyone's results. And who knows, maybe you will find your next best friend. If you just click on the music genre, you will find a very powerful connection with someone here with us today. So the way today is going to work in a nutshell, we, like Sarah and I, who are members of the book club team, would love to ask Tracy a lot of questions. We got some questions ourselves that we would like to ask her, but of course we would also like you all to ask any questions. So we would kindly ask, if you already have something that you're curious about asking, start typing it in the chat. We're going to ask you to come off mute and maybe interact a little bit as well. We'll start with some of our own questions just to, break the ice and really contextualize this book and how, useful it can be for learning and development professionals, like most of us here today, I assume, to really design more powerful learning and really keep in mind what is essential about connection and bonding, and how we can really leverage that for a happier and more productive workplace in our everyday work. So please, by all means, start typing your questions. If you have more questions coming along the way, feel free to raise your hand or type in the chat. We're very happy to submit your questions to Tracy. And I would like to start from scratch. We got a little insight into one of the most interesting parts of the book, but let's take a step back. And Tracy, would you tell us the story of how this book came about in a nutshell?
Sure. Yeah. So it's a book written by 3 people. And if you're thinking of writing a book, I wouldn't do it with 3 people, in the sense it's quite a thing to structure 3 very different perspectives. But Robin Dunbar is an evolutionary psychologist at Oxford. Sam Rockey had worked as head of leadership for a FTSE top 10 company for many years. And I had been working at the Oxford Said Business School. And I think all of us came together with a common interest, which is how do you create or what are the conditions for a group that is more than the sum of its parts? You know, that kind of free energy you get when, and all of us know that feeling of working with a group where you work incredibly hard, but you end up at the end of the day feeling actually energized and feeling like you're not drained. And also, you probably all had experiences as well of working in a group of really, really super talented people, but somehow put them together and it's actually less than the sum of its parts. And so I had been
Are we having some connection issues?
I think
Oh.
so.
Yeah, you're back, Tracy. Sorry, we lost you for a second.
Okay. Yeah, I just Robin had done the research really, and his lens is an evolutionary psychology one. You know, what doesn't change about human behavior? What rumbles beneath the surface of all our interactions? And what, by understanding that better, by understanding what we need as human beings, how can we actually, as people in the same, you know, you're all in the learning and development business, how can we actually design gatherings, design leadership development and so on that actually, you know, it uses that energy and that impetus. It's got 3 lenses, the book. So there is the evolutionary psychology one. There is, we looked at loss at scale, you know, and I'd be very interested to hear from you. I mean, certainly our experience was that, particularly as we spend more and more time in a hybrid situation, lots of groups have become too big to be productive. And so we looked at group size and what really works. And the last one is what are the sort of culturally foundational conditions for group thriving? And just lastly to say, it's not about just having a lovely work environment, but what we found was where these conditions were met, these were the groups that performed best, you know, felt safe to innovate and had real impact. So that's a bit of the background.
Amazing. Thanks for sharing. Our next question will be, we're curious to hear, how would you explain the social brain to a 5-year-old child?
Yeah, get off your screens, I think. You know, kind of we are social animals. You know, we've evolved and survived, and we are, you know, the amazing, you know, creatures that we are, primarily because we've found a way to thrive in small groups. And, you know, I think we lose touch with that at our peril. And so I think it is, yes, play together, laugh together, sing together, eat together, drink together, all the kinds of things that actually 5-year-olds do. But we kind of lose the skill of doing it somehow as we become adults. But those things are hugely important for bonding, hugely important for our sense of belonging and safety. And I think too often in work, we have a kind of a puritanical idea that work is something with a furrowed brow and a head down, and that actually all those things are part of work if we're seeking to invent together and imagine together and think about the future together. I don't know if that would appeal to a 5-year-old, but it's 5-year-olds, I think, probably know what they should be doing better than we do sometimes.
I think you're right. I think actually that they have an extraordinary imagination and creativity, and it's a shame that actually we don't leverage it enough.
Yeah.
Do you have maybe any tips to share with us about how we can bring more of the social brain at the center of learning discussions?
I think you already did a wonderful check-in. I mean, and you guys are experienced at this, but I think certainly in the work we do, there is not enough attention paid to beginnings and endings, and actually designing and really having the discipline to make space and time for beginnings. And I mean by that, people really understanding who's in the room and why they're in the room and what they can contribute. I think we quote in the book, although I've forgotten now, I think we quote in the book the English England team football coach, Gareth Southgate, and he said, I try to have the discipline that there's not one, even the youngest person in the team, who doesn't know that if they were taken out, the story would be different of the group. And I really like that sort of sense. And I wonder if we could bring into our discussions, if we could bring into our meetings that rigor, that everybody is there for a reason, everyone changes the story, and we know how they do. I think too often we're there in big meetings where actually people don't quite know why they are there. Their name is on the list. They were invited. There's no time for them to speak. And, they go from meeting to meeting like that. So I think it's having those kind of disciplines and rigors, and a sort of using what we try to do is have as our unit of identification the group, whereas often I think it is the individual. There are times when it should be the individual, but I think putting the group at the center of things does change the way you look at learning, development, leadership, the world that you're in.
Yeah, no, it's actually. Oh, was some echo? No, thanks. Actually, I think you touched upon a very interesting topic that instead, like sometimes we tend to focus to the individual, and actually we forget to look into the dynamics of the group and how actually they play a role into the development of people. I see a first question appearing in the chat. Ian, maybe you want to come on stage and ask it yourself to Tracy?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. When I was reading your book, I was interested to see talking about women, and women having a softer, weaker voice means that when a group grows, they tend to drop out of the conversation earlier because their voice doesn't carry it in the group. I work for a large manufacturing company, and we are looking at the fact that we have fewer women on the factory floor in the manufacturing roles than we would like in leadership roles and other roles. And I was wondering if you've seen any research looking into the fact that this is a noisy environment and that women maybe find it harder to be belong in that environment if they can't be heard and join in conversation.
Well, I think that's half the story, Ian. I mean, yes, there's a bit in our book about social style. I mean, and the social style of men and women is actually different. Robin did a big piece of research looking at mobile phone conversations, for example. And when women talk to women, they will often finish one another's sentences. They will sort of nod and make, kind of supportive noises while someone else is speaking. What he found was that guys often found that quite irritating, and tended to speak in statements more. But what was really interesting was that the women, when they were in mixed environments, they were the ones that had to change their speaking style. So, that sort of exhaustion of kind of speaking another language in a way. And he always says, if ever we go to a conference, he goes, look what happens in the breaks. Just watch what happens. Essentially women go and talk to women and guys talk to guys, because, it's more about social style than anything else. But your point about the slightly softer voices, I often think, it's for the guys in your noisy environment to actually make the women heard. I mean, if that's the issue, and to understand it. I mean, what I find alarming about that piece of research is that if there is less than 40% of women in stressful situations where decisions are being made, those women tend to withdraw. And you think about every board you can think of, I mean, so I think it's a double. It's at the back of the book there are the references for that research, but I think it is also about guys sort of understanding and sort of kind of making space for women to be heard. There's also that piece of research in the US Supreme Court, Sonia Sotomayor, the US judge, who realized that she was interrupted much more than male judges because, in a way, of her speaking style. And as a result, the people that she was representing got less law, got less time as a result. And they changed the structure, which I thought was quite interesting, so that every judge had 10 minutes uninterrupted to speak. And then the questions came. So there are ways that you can actually create structures that bring about more equality of voice. And, also I think, the guys on the shop floor perhaps can be better at listening. You have to just drive it harder, perhaps. I don't know. I don't know if that answers your question, but yeah.
No, that's very helpful. Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, I see Sarah speaking, but you're on mute. Typical, classical problem of virtual meetings that you don't have in real person. Imagine how that would be to be muted in real person. Luckily, we don't experience that. What were you saying, Sarah?
Yeah, I was saying, maybe you want to ask a question, Achille, since I don't see anything.
Yes. Yeah, and I invite everyone, by the way, either it's a question or maybe you have an insight that you gather from the book. We're going to ask another question to Tracy. We would really like to hear more voices, right? So maybe come off mute next and tell us even what you liked about the book. I think would be interesting for Tracy to hear that. And my point on this, I really appreciated the reflection on free riders. And for me, Tracy, it was kind of interesting to put it that way, right? I never thought about, maybe conflict or people resisting or escaping some of the social cohesion norms of a company as free riders. But it was really useful for me to frame it that way, not in an oppositional way, of course, but to try to understand these people more and see what you can do to, bring them on your side. So I would like to ask you regarding this issue of free riders in organizations, what have you seen that worked particularly well to, bring these people back into the social pact of the company?
Yeah, we've been very interested in this. I mean, there's, if you've read the book, will know that, the Dunbar number is 150, and Robin's research indicates that 150 is around the maximum number that any one of us, a number of relationships, really real reciprocal relationships that any one of us, given the size of our neocortex, given the length of the day, can hold at any one time. And what we discovered was that those people who were in organizations where essentially the size of the organization or the lack of face-to-face interaction meant that they were kind of anonymized in certain ways. And, again, that 150 number beyond which the weird stuff happens, it's the tipping point between we and us and them. But it's importantly, as far as your question goes, Akila, it's the point at which obligation, a sense of obligation, a sense of being witnessed and known, a sense at which, if you do something for me, I'll do something for you, tends to go away. So all this stuff we've been reading about quiet quitting and freeloading, and of course, not everything about being human is good. We'll get away with it if we can. But I think underlying that is a kind of sadness, and I think it's about not being known, about not mattering, about not being counted, and not being seen, not being rated, not being valued, not being stretched often, not being managed. And I think, it is difficult to manage hybrid teams, to know what people are doing without, constantly kind of measuring things. And it takes me back to, my point that I made to Sarah about human beginnings. I think too many projects just get going and we don't know one another. And so when it comes to it, that sense of obligation is just not there. So I don't know if that answers your question in any way, but I think, it is better management, better beginnings, really understanding who you've got in your team. And I think particularly, I sound like an old woman, but I think particularly the younger generation who have spent so much, who are new into the workforce, spent actually a lot of their time virtually. It sometimes is actually about giving them development in, the more kind of reciprocal skills and, that might not have been so well developed or just happened, at university or at college or, their training or whatever, somehow they might have missed out on some of that. Because I do think, I talk sometimes to the MBAs at Oxford, and there's sort of a sense that they have spent quite a lot of time virtually. And, as a result, maybe as you think about learning and development for your new intakes, maybe there are different things, different skills that would be skills to think about for them in terms of leadership and development.
Yeah, you really made me think with this idea of beginnings right now, because I'm thinking as a training professional, maybe sometimes we get onboardings wrong, and we have people missing out on a sense of belonging, on really feeling heard or seen. But I'm thinking that a lot of times training can be almost like a new beginning, because it's a first set up where you meet other people, you have a chance to really set up stories, foundational stories. And I do see that people come out of trainings, especially the ones that are a little more intensive, where the social aspect of it, maybe they're in person, maybe they're over the course of a few days. They really are an opportunity to reset, in a sense, their idea of what it means to belong to the company, and some of the stories that we tell, and how they make sense to the organization and the way it works. So I think I'm taking away from that, like, how can we create new onboardings every time we have a chance to, create a curated experience for people?
I'm really interested in those onboardings and inductions. And quite often I think any newcomer or moments of transition as well. I mean, coming back from maternity leave, for example, that so often the individual is required to flex to the organization, and the organization never makes an attempt, or rarely makes an attempt to flex to them. I think that your point about stories is well made. I mean, if we're doing a program, a learning program, we'll always begin by finding some way for people to tell a story about themselves. I mean, whether we use poetry, whether we use whatever we use, because it's such a lightning rod for moving the conversation on to something more profound. And I think the other thing, as you say, the trainings, one tends to focus on, the classes. What we try and do is kind of 24-hour design, where what we're really designing is the spaces in between, because those are the hugely important. And I never like those, I've just got off a call with the business school saying, oh, we're going to have a QR code at the end of each day, where they rate each class. And I go, it's not a series of classes and bits. It's a whole thing. It's a whole thing. Every meal is designed, every break is designed, and that's where the most important things happen. So your point exactly, that those are opportunities for creating the social health of your organization. I mean, there's so much money spent on physical and mental health in organizations, quite rightly. But when the World Health Organization described well-being, it was mental, physical, and social health. And I often think the social health part of it is the kind of Cinderella. It's not really invested in the same way because it's more complicated. It's a bit messier. But the sorts of things you're describing are absolutely, an opportunity for you to think about the social health of the learners that you're responsible for.
Lovely. Yeah. Gonna think deeper on how we design the in-betweens and not just the main sections.
Yeah.
That's great. Sarah.
I think, Tracy, you touch also another crucial issue that at the moment we in L&D we are in this transformation phase. I have the feeling, our work is changing, and I mean we should be much more intentional about what we put out there. So this is really a reminder to be intentional in what we design, and that's indeed everything has to be thought through. And
I think you're right, Sarah. It's such it's an exciting moment in lots of ways. I mean, the shape of work is being rethought. The danger, I think, is that, as you say, people aren't being intentional enough about it. I was sitting the other day in a boardroom, in a kind of empty boardroom with one of those huge tables and thinking, oh my goodness, people probably can't even see one another. There are too many people in the boardroom, and that actually, I'm sure a lot of the decisions get made in sort of cabals outside the boardroom. And if we were to really design our spaces, to design our comings together, to really get the most out of the gifts and talents of human beings, we kind of need to start from scratch in many ways. The spaces that we're in, quite interesting. Again, I was in that office. It was actually a group of office designers, and they said, "Oh, look at this collaboration space we've designed." And then the guy said rather ruefully, "Yes, but they all seem to gather over there where they always have." And I thought, you're not watching what people actually do and how they actually behave and working with the grain of that. You're trying to impose on them kind of an idea of how they should behave, And they did say, "Oh, we're being invited to design so many chill out spaces," he said, "but do people come to the office to chill out? There doesn't seem to be anyone ever in them, And I thought at your point, Sarah, there's so many. It's such an interesting moment to be in where we are, thinking about how do people learn, how do people develop, what will be the future shape of work, and how can we get the best of both worlds. I mean, look at us. I mean, I don't know where you are, all around the world, and we're talking magically here, but we're also human beings who need at times to be in the room together, creating social endorphins, building trust together. So.
Thank you.
Thanks.
I think we got some questions, right, Sarah?
Sorry?
I think we got some questions in the chat.
We do. So I would invite, if they feel comfortable, to start it. Emmy, would you like to come in the spotlight and ask your question?
Sure. Thank you so much. I really enjoyed the book a lot. And one of my focuses is employee engagement. And so I loved that you presented so many ideas that really could be implemented quickly. And I'm just curious, and this could be a loaded question, but if you have any advice on, if you have a team that maybe is toxic or dysfunctional, like what would be any advice you have to maybe reset that team to try to build relationships?
I think, I think you have to probably talk to all of them individually, and really get them to think not only about the behavior of others, but also to see whether they have the imagination and the maturity to understand how their behavior also impacts the team. I would always look at the team leadership as well. And then I think, I'm sorry, these are obvious things, but I would also look at their processes, practices, and habits and try and see how you could disrupt those in a creative way. And I mean, I think, if you're stuck with that team, there's no changing it. It's making it all of their problems. It's putting it's the elephant in the room, isn't it? It's actually, I think one has to make it explicit and actually, I think having an observer, I mean, maybe sometimes I will sit and if teams will allow me and just watch them. And sometimes people are very, very unaware of actually how they are really irritating one another. I mean, if they invite you in, I think you have a chance to help. Sometimes it's one person, and that is quite difficult. If it's one person, and maybe that person has to get a coach, or but sometimes it is a sense of team hopelessness. They've kind of been working at something that somehow isn't going right. So I think it's you being kind in a way. I mean, quite often people say to us, "How do we exclude people?" And it's such an odd, we've spent so long, all of us, haven't we, thinking about inclusion. But of course, actually, sometimes if the whole team is not working, sometimes it's you perhaps need to divide the team into two for certain things. I mean, I don't know if any of that's, I'm sure you've thought of all of that, but.
No, it's good. I like that. That's great feedback. I appreciate it. I like the idea to disrupt it and then to talk to each of the team members individually too, I think.
Yeah, I think so. You really get to the heart of it like that, I think, rather than just getting it through the prism of the leader or somebody who's the most unhappy.
Thank you.
Pleasure.
Okay. The next question.
Gail.
Would you like to come to stage? You are muted.
Here we go. Yes, I'm happy to. Thank you.
Okay. Start. I'm gonna take you here. Oh, sorry.
Cool. Well, thanks, Tracy. I really enjoyed reading the book. I read it twice because I was supposed to write a book review for Training Journal. So I really enjoyed it. It was a real pleasure to read. My question, actually, I work, and I think like a lot of people here, I work in, a lot of my work is strategic learning and instructional design. And I was very interested in actually the thought you put into every element of the program and the examples that you gave. And I couldn't help but bouncing on the comment you made earlier on about the breaks and the intentionality in the breaks. And I was wondering if you would be willing to share like a couple of tips with us about that, because it seems to be easy to design around content, but it's a lot harder to design around breaks because people are supposed to just go and do what they want.
I always think it's form and content, the form. So I am very big on, size and shapes of rooms, tables, acoustics, building in surprise during the week. I always think about a program as if it has like kind of the Edinburgh Fringe Festival around it, which is, bits for bringing people together. And I usually design around questions rather than answers. I think so much training is about solutions. I kind of flip that, but I'm largely working with senior leaders so that there is a question and a sense of coherence. So there's a governing idea through every day. So, for example, I have in my mind a kind of learning arc that begins with provocation. So somebody, and sometimes learning at an angle. There is straightforward training where you've got to learn how to do this. Mm-hmm. But leadership development, I think, often is most powerful if it comes in at an angle. So, for example, I just did a day on innovation and began with a professor of Latin and Greek who had written a book on ancient Greece and innovation. And what he brought was stories of innovation in ancient Greece and approaches to it. And we used that provocation then to have an immersion. So we worked with a wonderful designer. They rolled up their sleeves and were designing with all kinds of things. And then, so I do, provocation, immersion, then sense making. So what for us? What do we do this? We're in an insurance company and we're not kind of teaching Latin and Greek or whatever. What do we do with it? Then a time for reflection, and then tend to, at the end of the day, think about experiments, behavioral experiments. So how could we take a step into this? And so that's just one way of looking at things. I like to think of a program also, the weft and the weave of it. So also it moves towards something at the end. I tend to use peer learning quite a lot, small groups to make sense of things. Walking, quite a lot of walking with questions around walking. That, again, in the book, working with synchrony is hugely, if you walk in step with each other, again, that's, you get bonding out of that. The eating, very important. I make us get in round tables that are of a certain size so everyone can see one another and that, nobody is left at the end of a table with no one to talk to. And so really, really precise about how I design each bit of it, right the way through the day. I know that sounds a bit ridiculous, but if you've only got, a very short time for people who don't really know each other to trust each other and to have conversations that aren't simply surface conversations, you kind of have to make the room work for you, make everything work for you. So it's 4-man content.
And sorry, can I just jump on what you said about conversations, because it's quite interesting. I'm sure quite a few of us are back from Learning Technologies, and it's kind of a huge conference. Anyway, is there I've read the book, so I know you create a lot of thought, but in terms of meaningful conversations at the beginning, is there a theme? So how hard or easy is it to break the ice? I guess they're coming, so they want to break the ice, right? But if there's some people who resist, how do you manage the resistance?
I think anticipation, how you have the run into the program, hugely important. Always make it personal beforehand. It's much more difficult for people to withdraw if they already have a relationship with you or the key people before they start. So, sometimes there will be a call with tutor groups before they start. There's a sense of anticipation, sense of kind of excitement in the way it comes together. Again, as I said to Akila, often we'll begin by finding some way to get people to tell a story about themselves in a small group, whether it's small, sometimes we'll get people to bring a poem or something that they've enjoyed, even in childhood, or a song, and to read it and say why they chose it. And it's a lightning rod through to a different kind of conversation. The key for me is to get people to drop their shoulders, stop talking about either their children or their jobs or, or where they live, and actually to get very, very quickly into something more interesting for the group. So yes, I mean, I think, it's I always design a tone as well. The tone is key, and the danger is that the people who work don't adopt that tone. But the tone of the communications need to be containing, but also friendly, so that they know, they feel what you're doing, and you're going to contain their anxiety, but you're also going to be really, really friendly, particularly if you're asking them to do experiential learning where there's an element of personal risk that goes into it.
That is great. Thank you so much.
Pleasure.
And I really enjoyed the book. Thank you.
Pleasure.
All right. I think we got one more question from Patricia. Would you like to come off mute?
Yes. Hello, Tracy.
Hi, Patricia.
I love the book. I love what you're saying right now. It's all very inspiring. I found that, everything you said in the book, that's great. I immediately I want the world to look like this, right? Like tomorrow. But then I find that a lot of the workplace right now is very focused on KPIs, on, measuring productivity. And recently I've started also working for an NGO, and they, coming from an effective altruism movement, are also very focused on cost efficiency. So a lot of it is focused on like cutting down connection, right? Because we can do more maybe productive work if we work very independently and autonomously, and maybe cut unnecessary meetings and things like that. So I wonder, I also realized that you have rich experience in consulting and actually working with executives and CEOs. I wonder, from your experience, how have you convinced people in the positions of decision making that it's important to like even like pay for designing for culture or hosting these events, but are just being very lean and cutting it down?
No. That's a super good question. And, I'm not a Pollyanna about these things. Of course, we all work within constraints. But I actually think there is a way that you can convince people that what we're talking about here is a different kind of efficiency. I think it is hugely efficient for people who have to make decisions together, work together, probably be far-flung, to come together and to develop trust together. It's hugely efficient down the line. I'm just starting to work in government where, you're lucky if there'll be water there, kind of in terms of cost pressures and so on. But it's extraordinary how this pays dividends down the line, this kind of human connectivity. Connectivity now seems to involve essentially being connected to the internet. And of course, I'm talking about human connectivity. And I think particularly one or two have used the word transformation up until now. I mean, we can use all the brilliant tools we have to be more efficient and to cut costs. But those of us who are in the business of actually transforming society, transforming industries, transforming our lives, actually all those things are just tools, and they need the human beings who will wield those tools to better or worse extent to be able to take risks, leaps together, to trust each other. So I think it is about convincing people that this is the most efficient, cost-effective thing that they can do. Because otherwise, what do you have? You're actually treating people simply like resources, human resources, who will be just fulfilling tasks. And, that can keep you going for a while, but it's not going to invent the future.
Mm-hmm. Thank you so much, Tracy. If I can just have a quick follow-up, I'm curious, so if it's so important to give like evidence-based results, right? Is there any, do you bring case studies to the people you work with? Do you kind of do you try to satisfy their part of the brain that really needs to hold on to, the numbers, basically?
Well, I mean, partly why I got together with Robin originally was because he had numbers. And I know that sounds ridiculous, but I was used in a business school for being the voice that looked at things that were soft or nice to have, or, just not at the center of things. And yet when we did research about what kind of learning really, really got people to then go and change their behavior and do different things, it was this experiential learning, working with musicians, working with improv. It was extraordinary. And these people leading organizations. And I knew instinctively that Robin's research that had the numbers on it would actually help me in kind of getting people to listen to how important it was. I don't know if that answers your question, but you're right. Yeah. But yes, I mean there are examples in the book, quite a lot of examples in the book, of things have worked and had absolutely real kind of measurable outcomes. Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, and now we have your research to cite, right? So I might as well just say, social brain.
Feel free. Cite it. Yeah.
For providing that.
Yeah.
Thank you, Patricia. Let's see. Sarah, I think our time is approaching the end. I think we've actually already passed the time. We asked Tracy for 45 minutes of our time. Is it okay for you to continue until the top of the hour, Tracy? Or
yeah, I'm fine. Absolutely fine. Yeah.
Okay, I see. Are there any more questions? Let's ask for a last round. If you want to raise your hand, I see there's something in the chat, but I'm not sure that we can take both, right? So, Elena, would you like to? Do you have a question for our author?
Yeah. Can I?
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, it's slightly delayed. Sorry, the video. My question here was about executive teams. We have 10,000 people, organizations. So executives for us are VPs and managing directors of the country's subsidiaries. And we are focusing on cross-functional collaboration, breaking the silos. And what we found out that in the middle, actually, that's functioning very well. So the role model from the top is kind of not coming across. And when we were looking at the ways how to approach it, actually, executives, they do not feel themselves as a real team because each of them are responsible for their piece of business. But that's the role modeling. What they do are cascading to the organization. So any maybe advices on that?
That's sort of classic problem.
yeah, absolutely.
What would my instinct be? My instinct would be that the people at the top actually do need to spend some time in one another's company and to really think about what it means to be a leader in that organization of 10,000 people, and it's not kind of working very well. So that, again, back to my previous point about efficiency, is something huge. People say, we'll never have time. That is the work at that senior level, is to come together and to work out how they are going to role model leadership. I think at a lower level, it's interesting how many organizations are becoming kind of siloed more because, finance is in on Tuesdays and Wednesdays and whatever. And I think one of the things is the role of connector, the weft and the weave of, the role of connector across is hugely unsung. And that actually there are people who are the hubs and the nodes of organizations, and actually really recognizing them, giving them time, and almost giving them titles, giving them really focusing on that role, which usually it's just, it's Eleanor, she knows everyone, she can do this and this, and you get everything. I think those roles are not well enough developed by organizations. They're hugely important. And they usually just come on top of everything else. We certainly find when we're doing work with organizations, they say, well, we'll have ambassadors for culture. And it's the same old people who have to do everything, So it looks like you've got a two-layer problem. By the way, anyone, if you've got further questions for me, do connect with me on LinkedIn, and I'm always happy to sort of, kind of noodle something around with you, or to give you my 2 pence worth if it's at all useful. So, very happy to.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Tracy. That's very nice, and I'm sure a lot of our participants will take up on that opportunity. So, Sarah, should we start wrapping up? What do you think?
Sure. Let's do that. But maybe, like just to ask a final question that I had actually for Tracy, because I think we touched some interesting points. So coming back to this idea that, we are in this midst of an identity crisis in the L&D, and that we're changing, and then we are connecting the dots and getting out of our siloed discipline somehow. How would you see the development of leadership? Sorry, how would you see the future of leadership development?
That's a nice small question for me to end with. Thank you, Sarah.
I would like to close with this question. How would you see leadership development in 10 years from now?
That's such a big question. I mean, just very quickly, I think our conception of an organization as a pyramid is, kind of not very helpful for this complex, virtual analog world that we live in. There's a rigidity to it. I think that, I think the job of a leader is to build leaders, really. I like the idea of organizations. I think we talk about it in the book as sort of 15s, lots of 15s where, that actually, are united by a sense of shared purpose and value and so on. So I think, giving away power, how do you give it away? How do you understand your effect on others? How do you enable others? Who is it? Not Amy Edmondson, who talks, I think it's her, it's usually her, isn't it? Who talks about the best leader is somebody who, not when somebody is in their presence thinks, oh, that's the best leader, but thinks that they are the best that they've ever been because of being in that presence. I think that, enabling others, unlocking others, that those kind of facilitative skills that I think are still underappreciated in leadership. They seem to be sort of secondary, but actually that idea of structuring and helping people to give voice to their ideas, to bring all the talents into the room and give shape to it. And it's a both and. It's a zooming out, zooming in. It's a stepping into the swamp. It's not about mastery. It's about the confidence, I think, to be able to deal with uncertainty. That's just a list, but I have really strong thoughts about how leadership development, and I think this is a really exciting moment for you guys to be in the areas that you're in, to really rethink what we need for the future, what kinds of leaders do we need, and management. Don't underestimate management as well. It's sort of been the fallen brother of leadership, but actually, really good management, I think, is in slightly short supply in some of the organizations we work with anyway, at the moment. So I don't know if that's helpful.
Amazing. Yeah, amazing. Well, some food for thought.
For sure. So we like to wrap up these sessions by asking everyone to post in the chat one practical takeaway. We talked about a lot of things, big ideas, more practical, implementable ideas. So before you leave, we would love to hear what's one thing that you can start applying tomorrow to make some of these ideas come alive in your organization. And as you submit your answers, of course, we would like to thank Tracy so much for her generosity and availability to stay with us and answer all of our questions. It was really an insightful hour spent together. Thank you, Tracy.
It was a total pleasure. Thank you for your great question.
All right. I'm adding mine as well.
I see the first answer popping up. Ian, organizing a lunch before a management team meeting. Amazing. Leveraging the power of food for connection.
Yeah.
Don't
Ian,
for-
it changes the outcome of the meeting. I absolutely know that. Yeah. So don't have it at the end. Have it at the beginning.
And Mikael, don't forget the beginnings and the endings. Amazing. And I would say maybe just sometimes a little check in and check out like we're doing today can already help. Designing the in-between moments of my next training. Love it. Achille. Elena, also the same, design spaces in between. Achille added a second one.
Too many things.
Collaborative playlist at workshop. I love this idea, and it was also the first thing that came to mind when I read that thing in the book about music. Value those connectors. They help create a sustainable culture. Beautiful one. Thanks, Kate, for sharing. Lina, create anticipation and excitement before and. Indeed, very important. And content and form both matters.
Awesome.
Emmy, the in-between times from meeting to meetings.
Patricia is making a small butter. Makes sense. We agree. Like, butter is a nice way to, create a little bit more of an experience around virtual meetings. So great point there. Great culture is efficiency. Building a culture is the task of executives. Yes. All right.
Fantastic. Great. Well, great comments, and good luck to you all in your wonderful jobs, wherever you are. Thank you for reading the book. And I'd be interested to hear how you change things. So do keep in touch.
Will do. Thank you so much, Tracy.
Thank you all for attending.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank
All
you.
right. We'll post news on the next book club in all of our channels, so stay tuned for that.
Yep.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, everyone.